Well, old Buddha was a man, I'm sure that he meant well. But I pray for his disciples, lest they wind up in hell. I'm sure that old Mohammed thought he knew the way. But it won't be Hare Krishna you stand before on Judgment Day. For it won't be old Buddha sitting on the throne. And it won't be old Mohammed that's calling us home. And it won't be Hare Krishna that plays that trumpet. We are going to see the sun-locked Reverend Moon. Do you make all yourself a Baptist, not be born again? Presbyterian or Methodist, still die in your sin. You may be a Pentecostal, shout and dance and jump a few. But if you hate your brother, you won't be one of the chosen few. For it won't be old Buddha sitting on the throne. And it won't be old Mohammed that's calling us home. And it won't be Hare Krishna that plays that trumpet too. We are going to see the sun, not Reverend Moon. Tonight we're looking at step 2. I came to believe that a power greater than myself, and in 12-step terminology usually they would say a higher power greater than myself, could restore me to sanity. I came to believe. In the original renditions of 12-step style recovery, 10 Decisions of Wholeness, Oxford Fellowship's beliefs about recovery, that was left out. The I came to believe was not necessary in 1700 or in 1800 even, because schools, up until I was in 6th grade, read scripture in public school, prayed in public school. Everybody seemed to believe in a God, and our school was probably 30% Catholic and the rest some kind of Protestant, and most of the kids were aware that there was a Sunday school, whether or not they went. And most people, if you ask them about their church affiliation, they would say that they were a member of such and such church, couldn't tell you the address, couldn't actually tell you the full name of the church, didn't know what denomination or abomination it might have been, had no idea who the pastor was or the head deacon was, but boy, they're a member of that church, which means that they may make it on Easter and Christmas, you know. And that was just kind of the way it was, but the truth was very few people would say they didn't believe in God. And the positive peer pressure to believe was much stronger than the peer pressure as today to not believe. It was just a different world. But the idea of I came to believe suddenly becomes necessary. I find it to be one of the weirdest things in my life experience of 68 years that so many American people have not even heard the gospel of Jesus Christ, or know very little about Him, or what opinions they do have are negative because they've been formed by what people say about televangelists, or they've been formed by what they've seen in the lives of Christians who say they're Christians, but their lives demonstrate nothing beyond or different than what they believe. You either find people who don't believe at all, who choose against belief because of what they've seen masquerading itself as belief. Does that make sense? Yes. So suddenly we have this issue where we have a whole basis of basic faith. So how do we come to believe? I've come to a 12-step meeting. I'm tore up from the floor up. I'm beat up from the feet up. I'm a wreck up from the neck up. My life is in dismay and is in disarray, and I'm in dismay. And somebody tells me, come to this 12-step group. I'm going to help you get sober, and the group will help you get sober. And we show up at the group, and they say, second step you need to come to believe that a power greater than yourself, you need to come to believe that a higher power can help you stay clean, because you're powerless, you can't do it, you'll never do it on your own, and you can come to group, but the moment you drop out and don't come to group for a while, you're going to be back to everything you used to be. So you got to have a higher power, and this guy's like, I don't even know what that means. Well, you got to believe that something outside of yourself can help you. Okay? I don't even know what that means, you know. And so you find people utilizing inanimate objects. Well, this is my higher power. I'm going to keep it handy, and when I feel like using, I'm going to get a hold of this, and I'm going to polish my brass doorknob. Or I'm going to get a hold of this picture, as the one lady said, is Jimi Hendrix, and meditate on the fact that his addiction took him out, and I'm not going to let mine take me out, you know. And so you find people whose higher power is an inanimate object. But the problem is that the inanimate object, or your fixation on it, or your utilizing of it as a distraction, like you got an urge to use, so you snap the rubber band on your arm, you know, those kind of things. They work to a point. But when the chips are really down, when life really throws a crushing blow at you, you're going to find that doesn't work, and you're going to find that even after 2.5 years of really, really working a good program, that most people go back to their behavior. If not just a short-term relapse, really most back to the way of life, and until it beats them up again and they're back to where they tore up from before, etc. They show back up at group. Hey, good to see you back. You know, starting over. Yep, starting over. I got 37 hours clean and sober, and everybody claps and says good for you, and maybe clean, but certainly not sober. You know, because clean is the absence of the substance, and sober is the way in which you live your life. You know, and so. The inanimate object doesn't work. So how do I bring someone from A to Z to where they can at least believe that there is a higher power that can restore them to sanity? Well, it starts, since faith isn't taught everywhere anymore, it starts first of all by the testimonies of others. And again, the problem is that Christianity and the church, we've lost our credibility because we haven't walked out our talk. We haven't lived our belief system. We haven't shown, some of the people that are the loudest about their faith in Jesus and get rebuked at AA because instead of just saying God or higher power, they're wanting to preach Jesus. They're the ones that show up drunk 2 weeks later and totally decredibilize anyone that themselves, and therefore anyone that was leaning towards what they might have to say because they looked really happy. Says, well, that doesn't work for him, you know. The song lyric I shared the other day with you, there's a hole in Daddy's arm for all the money days. Jesus Christ died for my sin. What a sad commentary that so many professing that Christ is their higher power, that Christ keeps them clean, that Christ keeps them sober. It doesn't really happen that way. And so one of the first ways that somebody new to a meeting is going to come to the belief that there's a higher power that can set them free is if they see it working in the lives of others. One of the main reasons your neighbor is going to come to Christ or come with you to church and eventually come to Christ is because they see something different in you. I fixed the man's plumbing and he became part of our family. I loaned the man a ladder and gave him some tips about staining decks, and we talked about different brands of stain, and we became friends. It's taken me a couple months to work my way up to where this guy says to me, you know what, I got to come here to you Sunday morning. I'm going to do my best to be there. There has to be something about you, the joy you exude, the stability that your life appears to have, hopefully does have. There has to be something about you where your testimony is believable. And that's what we've lacked as a church. We tell them Jesus will heal you and nobody gets healed. We tell them Jesus will save you, but nobody appears to be all that saved. We tell you Jesus will change your life, and yet Barna's whole religion in America shows us that Christians live the same lives as non-Christian neighbors. So first way that we're going to bring somebody to believe that a higher power could restore them to sanity is by showing them restoration in our own lives. One of the things that I always have done to men and families that I was sponsoring was tell them, it's great to go down, and I won't name it because I have Fresno people listening, it's great to go down to that meeting, but all you're going to find there is your next connection or your next running buddy, because everybody down there that is there is only there to get the blue card signed, with very rare exceptions. There's very few old-timers. There's very few sobriety going over a couple months. Find you a meeting, and anybody, whether you're out there on Facebook or Facebook Live or here in this meeting, find a meeting to get involved in where some people are there with long-term sobriety. Find yourself some old-timers, and find yourself some old-timers that are enjoying their sobriety. The chair of one of the meetings that I used to take guys on probation to, great meeting because it had a real eclectic difference of Christians, non-Christians, long-term sobriety. That's where we took newcomers to see long-term sobriety. But one of the reasons I did is because one of the examples of non-term sobriety was the old guy chairing the meeting regularly who'd say, "You need to get sober so you can be clean and have a life like me." Nah, no thanks. Gotta be something more to it than that, Sobriety's gotta be better than that, or I'm not sure I need it, You gotta be like me. It's like, nah. So find meetings with people that are really working the 12 steps in their lives. Knowledge and powerlessness. Reaching out to higher power, committing their will and their life to the care of God as they understand God, and growing every day in their understanding of how much He loves them. Dealing with themselves, dealing with others, working a program. Make it a point to find people to surround yourself. Find a mentor, a sponsor, and find a mentor or a sponsor who's happy about being down and happy about being sober. It's real important. It's a great life to have. It is, and it can be. As you're giving your testimony to others, and you hear me say this often, it's one of my favorites, and my kids all say it, preach Jesus to everyone you meet, with everything in you, and if necessary, but only if absolutely necessary, use words. Let your life do the talking. And to the point, again, that they ask, well, what is it about you? Again, the people around here that I'm making friends with, man, it's usually 3 or 4 encounters before I ever even tell them that I come down here. And another 3 or 4 before I tell them that I'm the pastor. And it's going to be difficult when I have to say, well, I'm the pastor down there. It works really well for me to say, well, I'm the interim pastor helping them out because they don't have a pastor. See? Because then my inviting them doesn't have as much of a sound to it that I need you to come so I can have more notches in my belt. Because I don't want people to believe it's about that. I don't want to believe it's about that. I don't want it to be about that. I want it to be about living Jesus for people. One of the most important questions that I asked in a board meeting 40 years ago. I had been running a program for about a month, and I said, a great question is, if I wasn't a recovery program director, would I still be sober? I've been clean and sober 8 years. I started the program when I was 7 years clean. If it wasn't my job to live this life, how well would I still live it? That was 1984. In 1998, he founded an inner city church down in the hood, near Hooker Row and Homeless Park, and down there where we were really reaching out to people who needed the Lord. And our 12-step program could run well over 100. And I asked the question again: if it wasn't my job to be a Christian, would I still do that? Would I be living this active, this involved? Would I be trying this hard to live a victorious life if it wasn't vocationally what I was doing with my life? And that's a good question. find people to lead you that are genuine in their faith, that really love their life as believers. Second way to come to believe in a higher power of some kind. Anybody out there? The existence of God is by family history. I have two very diverse family histories. And I have the Erickson clan, as far back as we can find, Swedish alcoholics. And I have the Cusick clan, as far back as we can find, patriots, teetotalers, and godly people. So I have these two very diverse heritages. And my family history shows me what I want to be and what I don't want to be. And because of my family history being so diverse, I've gone as a youngster in one direction and starting at 22 in the other direction, because I didn't like what I was becoming, and so I leaned towards what I had seen in other family members. So family history, testimony of others, but most important, personal revelation. Tell you a story real quick. The young man fell off a cliff. Fell hard. I don't know what the name of the bottle was he fell into, but he fell hard off a cliff. And he grabbed a hold of a branch, and he was hanging there by the branch, screaming bloody murder, somebody help me. And the branch began to come loose, and the roots began to show, and the dirt began to fall hundreds of feet down the cliff. And the man was just yelling, somebody help me, when suddenly a voice came out of nowhere and said, I'm here, my son, I will help you. And he said, who is it? And he says, this is God, your Father and your Creator, and I'm here to save you. Oh, wonderful. What do I need to do? Let go, and I will catch you. Is there anybody else up there? Personal revelation. Here's a statement that I'd like you to learn to say for yourself in your witnessing. Salvation, the restoration of God through Jesus Christ. Salvation comes by revelation, not by education. Testimonies can show you a different way. Family history can show you a different way. People can lead you in 12-step faith-based studies like this and show you a different way. And unfortunately, the Church of Jesus Christ today, most of the church in the Western church world has allowed that to be enough. Make a decision. Make a decision to accept Jesus. Your life's going nowhere. He will save you. You're going to hell. He'll save you. Your life's going nowhere. He'll restore you. You need to decide to serve Jesus. Okay, I'm going to do it. And I grip my teeth. I'm going to serve God and it kills me, and I'm going to do this, And we make a decision in our brain to do this, and then everything goes wrong. And when we make that decision, we get excited. I've made the best decision in my life. I've accepted Jesus. And one of the miracles that he accepted Jesus, that's another story. I've accepted Jesus. And we get really excited. Here's how Jesus said it. Jesus said, people come to me and they declare their belief in me. And the seed is planted. And they get all excited. And they leave anon with joy. And then tribulation comes for the sake of the seed of the word. Because tribulation is supposed to force it deeper, to make roots and to grow strong. But because there's no root, he says, when tribulation comes, and they didn't let the trials test them and try them, it says, they sprout up real fast, but because there's no root, when the sun comes, when the tribulation comes, when the heat's on, they fall away. That's what happens when people at 13 years of age at Camp Wiki Up get involved in the emotional situation of an incredible youth speaker, and everybody goes down to Lake Wiki Up and gets baptized, and they pat them on the back of the head and say, "You got it, brother, see you in heaven. And by the way, now that you're saved, you're always saved. Nothing can take you away from it." And off they go, and they live like the devil for the next 40 years, and you try to bring them to Christ. And I mean, I have had this experience, especially since I moved out here almost 10 years ago to the Bible Belt. Well, I accepted Jesus when I was a kid, and I know all about that. Well, you know all about that, but you obviously don't know Him, because He's changed His life. And our churches are filled with people who know all about God but don't have a relationship with Him. We're filled with people who have accepted the idea of salvation through Christ, but haven't had a personal revelation that caused them to have a dramatic, traumatic conversion experience. One of the good things about this kind of program, this kind of teaching, is that people really do crash to the point that they're desperate. They are taught about what it means to be powerless, and as a result, they dramatically and traumatically turn their life and their will over to the care of God as they understand God. And a lot of times that's not a very good understanding, but if the heart is there, now He can bring them that revelation. No one comes to Christ. Talk about faith-based or something. No one comes to Christ as a higher power unless God the Father draws them. Did you know that? You can't even get saved unless God Himself is drawing you to that place. There's a great word in the Song of Solomon. It says, "Don't awaken love before the time." If you argue somebody into Christ, the devil will argue them right back out of Christ with somebody smarter and better looking than you. Come along and argue them right back out of it. God draws people. And you say, man, I hear so many people say, "Oh, if only I would have gotten saved sooner and wouldn't have had so much wreckage." You got saved when He drew you. And most of the time when people come to a faith-based 12-step program, most of the time when people come into a church that I'm a part of, involved with, I look at them and I say, I believe God Himself is drawing them to Himself. But nobody comes to Jesus until God draws them. And it took 400 years for the Israelites to be ready, for their pride to be perfected. That's a good thing. Second thing, Jesus said, "No one comes to me unless the Father draws him, and no one comes to the Father unless they come to me." So you can't bypass Jesus and go straight to God as your higher power, because Jesus said you can't. And He proved through many miracles that He was the one, particularly the miracle of resurrection. We'll talk about that in a minute. Easy beliefism. You got it, brother. See you in heaven. Only inoculates people against a true spiritual awakening. 12 steps. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of working these steps. Making it easy. Well, Jesus did all the work and there's nothing for you left to do. Well, no, you better work through this stuff and deal with yourself and deal with the people you've wronged, because those are the things that will trigger you, and those are the things that will stumble you throughout the rest of your life in recovery. There must be a spiritual awakening. Easy beliefism only inoculates against that. So, I came to believe. That's about coming to believe. The testimonies of others. Secondly, family history. Third, the drawing or the revelation of Christ. And then there's a fourth one, and that is personal experience. I've been in prison groups of well over 100, and I ask this question. How many of you have had at least one experience in your life that was so radically off the chain that you could only attribute that to some form of supernatural spiritual intervention? You were falling off the cliff, and next thing you know, you're standing on the cliff. My friend drove a VW microbus in Brazil, filled with his family, and went upside down tumbling through the air, landed on its wheels, and did nothing but pop before diving. And nobody got his scratch. And we're talking a big clip. I'm talking, boom. Nobody got it. His son was in a leaking dugout canoe kind of thing for fun, playing, being towed behind the chug boat up the Amazon River when the rope came undone. And they lost him. A few hours later, the boat comes back, but it's a mile out there, and there's no way to see him until suddenly something happened where they saw him. These are the kind of things that happen. That's just one family. I've had several of those kind of things happen to me to where I knew that he was real. And when I asked that question, even in prison, especially in prison, I should say, how many of you had some kind of experience where you know God was involved? About 80% will raise their hand and say, I've had some kind of experience. A lot of people that you find, and those of us that have lived the more radical, wild, wrong kind of lifestyle, we're more prone to have had those kinds of experiences just to keep us alive. How did I live to be so old and wise? Because God protected me when I was young and stupid. And so that's how we come to believe in what? In a power greater than ourselves. How do you choose a higher power? Doorknob collection? Again, we talked about that. Framed picture of Jimi Hendrix? We talked about that. The man with the oak tree, and eventually the oak tree died, so we had an oak stump, and that was his higher power. We talked about how that works, the inanimate object. But I started tonight with a song. Won't be old Buddha up sitting on the throne. Won't be old Muhammad calling us home. Won't be Hare Krishna plays that trumpet tune. We're going to see the sun, not Reverend Moon. And you youngsters don't even know who Reverend Moon is, but his disciples were called the Moonies back in the 60s, and there were a lot of them. And before they died, Confucius, the Chinese philosopher that said a lot of really good things, before he died, Confucius said, I am not the way. Before he died, Mohammed, whose religion is the fastest growing religion in America today, Mohammed said, I don't know the purpose of life. Before he died, Buddha said, seek for the truth. And before he died and was therefore and then resurrected, Jesus said, I am the way. I am the truth. I am that. One said, I'm not the way. The other said, seek the truth. The other one said, I don't know the purpose of life. Jesus said, I am that way. I am that truth. And I am that life. Wow. That's a trip, huh? So, taking my higher power. First of all, the inanimate object. It has no power. It becomes what the Scripture calls an idol. And the power that you do assign to it stops when the heat comes, when the test is on, when the trial comes. How about group consciousness? One of the most important things that they teach in many 12-step anonymous type programs is that the consciousness, the group consciousness, the group strength, the accountability, the camaraderie, the encouragement that comes from being part of a recovery family, that can be your higher power. And that makes sense. I mean, that's really good stuff, to have other people to hold you accountable. But man, oh man, I've got people in my life right now that I've been working hard to hold accountable, but when they don't want to be accountable, they just turn their cell phone off and they don't answer, or they block your call and they don't answer, and you go to their house and they don't answer the door, That idea of this group being the higher consciousness and this group being my higher power by virtue of the group camaraderie, that works again until something happens to cause it to not work. One thing it can be that's very common is that somebody in the group can just be a jerk and just break your heart and offend the daylights out of you, and you're rightfully troubled, rightfully broken by what they said, because it's real. and suddenly the group loses a whole lot of power, doesn't it?
And maybe the one that you love the most.
Absolutely. Or as I used to tell them in the men's recovery program, the one in here you like the least is the one that's the most like you. That's an awful truth right there. It just is. But here's the problem. When we use a psychoactive behavior or substance to cope with life's difficulties, it changes our brain chemistry. If we do something that simulates dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, other than our body producing it through good diet and exercise, and we synthesize that through a behavior, a system, or a substance, your brain actually comes to believe that it needs that as much as you need to drink water, eat food, breathe air, and eliminate. That is added to the list of things that you must do to live. And it happens on a biochemical level. So you can be doing great, but unless there's something going on in you, spiritual awakening wise, unless there's something happening that can overpower, override, strengthen you during that moment, no matter how good your group is, no matter how well your new system of polishing your doorknobs works, whatever it might be, when that thing goes long enough without being satisfied, and the depression hits, and the depletion of your neurotransmitters hits, there needs to be an alternative high. A friend of mine has a group that he runs. It's a very large foundation. It has become that. And they give recovery materials and recovery videos done by middle school heroes to every middle school in America. And it's called Natural High. And it's an incredible program. And I used to use mountain trips where we'd go stay in the mountains for 3 to 5 days, sometimes even longer, depending on what all was going on. Every month, I spent a fourth of my life at a mountain cabin with a group of up to 10 men, because our cabin slept 11. That's a great natural high. I taught them into windsurf. I taught them into fish. Those are things that really help. But ultimately, because again, they create a positive way of replenishing norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. But in reality, when that triggers and that hits, there needs to be something realistically powerful and supernatural to keep you from following that instinct. There needs to be somewhere where you turn for strength that is honestly and truthfully strength. In order for me to find a power greater than myself, what must I first do? Recognize I need that power. Recognize that I'm powerless. Recognizing that I need something outside of me that's bigger than me to come live in me and change me. And again, the teaching of the group is wonderful, but all this is designed to do is get you to the place where 12 steps, is somewhere along the line between 1 and 12, as those principles were built into my heart and life, I had a genuine and honest spiritual awakening that changed me. My higher power needs to truly be a higher and greater power. It needs to be a power that I acknowledge greater than myself. It needs to be a living power. The other religious leaders, they are all dead. Jesus is the only one that is alive. How do I know that? There's a brilliant thinker named Josh McDowell. He wrote 3 books. He was an attorney, and he hated God and he hated Christ, and he was going to prove that the resurrection wasn't real. And he traveled around the world proving that the resurrection wasn't real, and ran face first into Jesus Christ, the living Lord. And he wrote a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And he wrote another book, More Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And then for lawyers, he wrote a book that I've given to lawyers, written as a legal brief called A Ready Defense. Then there's another brilliant thinker, Francis Schaeffer. There's another one, C.S. Lewis. There's another one that's alive today and going around the country preaching. His book, Case for Christ, was such a phenomenon in changing lives that they made it into a movie. And you can go on Netflix and you can watch Case for Christ. It's wonderful. It's a great movie. Lee Strobel is his name. And you can watch Lee Strobel's movie. Lee Strobel, and you can watch that movie on your telephone. Case for Christ. Life-changing movie. But Christ is alive. These men, and by the way, Lee Strobel was setting out to prove that the resurrection wasn't real. And he, like Josh McDowell, ran face to face into a living Jesus. So first of all, I came to believe. Secondly, in a power greater than myself. And finally, that could accomplish something needed for me, that could restore me to sanity. If you walk in here still under the influence, I mean, great, you're 72 hours clean, but you're still under the influence, even though you're not intoxicated. If you come in here to a meeting or a meeting like this somewhere else, and you are still struggling with active addiction. I talked to a young man yesterday who has a real strong addiction, but he is virtually never drank or used drugs, but he has a real strong addiction in another area of his life. And he was really jubilant and exuberant that he hadn't acted out in 2 months. And yet, a professional counselor, one of the best in his region, had reached out to him, and he never returned the call. And the counsel that I gave him, he never followed. And yet, when I said, you need to do these things if we're going to continue this streak you're on, he had all these reasons why he didn't need to. And it all had to do with practice. By hook or by crook, he had managed not to act out in his aberrant behavior for 2 whole months. And you know, I'm like, well, that's wonderful, but you've known me a lot of years, and you know what I teach and you know what I believe, and you've trusted me. I'm telling you this, you need to talk to the counselor. You need to get into a group, and here's where the groups are that you can go to. You need to be doing something to help you keep on in your good direction, because if you come in and think you're going to do this on yourself, your own, it's not going to work. The higher power, relationship with God through Christ, can restore you to sanity. What? You're saying I'm insane? Yep. And here's the clinical definition of insanity. Insanity is the inability to maintain personal integrity, telling the truth, being self-sufficient, being responsible for your own life and your family, meeting your own needs, self-sufficiently. If you can't do that, you're a third insane. Number 2, insanity is, and by the way, 40+% of Americans are on taxpayer-produced public assistance of some kind because they can't make it on their own for some reason. And I understand these are tough times, and I understand that the economy is getting worse. But I tell you what, 3 years ago, before COVID, we had the lowest unemployment rate, the highest hiring rate that we had in many years, especially amongst people who typically find it difficult to get employed. And so, insanity is the inability to do life on your own, and 40% of Americans do it. Number 2, insanity is the inability to routinely perform social civic duties. You can't obey the law. You don't vote. You don't pay your taxes. You don't maintain a stable place in the community as a positive influence on society. Number 3, insanity is the inability to recognize number 1 and number 2 in your life. It's living in delusion, living in denial. I know a family that is now on the 4th generation. I know who the great-grandmother was. I know the grandmother personally. I've known her over 40 years. I know her children that are in their 50s. I know their children that are in their 30s and 20s. And everyone in the family has lived their lifestyle, for one reason or another, totally on, everyone but one, totally on the welfare system without working. And they will tell you that they are normal, that they are okay, that they're good Americans, that they're good citizens, and they all file for different kinds of disability. And when I sat down with one of them and calculated how much they were making off the system, $60,000 a year worth of benefits, food stamps, Section 8 housing, had a better home than I did for a tenth of what I was paying, or 20th of what I was paying. Free phones, free food, 100% free medical care, a cash out amount for each child. That's California. And that's why 11,000 Californians a month are moving to Texas. And California continues to grow by 16,000 to 17,000 citizens a month.
And what is their marriage service like?
Beside the reefer or other than the reefer?
I had a note here from when we rewind the camera back when we first started, I kind of the story to say, I got this, and then it was made better. We essentially got it made better.
Number one, I can't take care of myself. Number two, I can't live rightly amongst fellow citizens. Number three, I don't even recognize it. Like this family, when we say, hey, we're fine, man. You know? And they're doing really well because they've learned how to work the system, but that doesn't mean it's right. And then there's a delusion that sets in that says it is right. Another example is I've had numerous clients over the years gotten caught and mostly gotten fired because of in some way being dishonest in the job. One guy was using his company gas card to keep all of his family's cars filled. Another several working for one particular company that hired our guys. Another handful of guys would over-calculate how many square feet they were installing of their product, and therefore pad their paycheck. And of course, they get caught eventually and they get fired. And that kind of dishonesty is part of the insanity that happens with addiction, because you do whatever you think you need to do to survive. But here's the problem. When confronted with their behavior, the problem was that they had a reason. They don't pay me what I'm going to need. They don't appreciate me as much as they should. So I'm getting only what I actually should be getting anyway. It's not like I'm hurting anybody. I'm just taking what I should get. Lack of integrity, that's number one. Lack of ability to live within the rules, that's number two. And the inability to recognize that that's a problem. I got this coming. I got this. So, step two. I came to believe. Be the reason someone else believes this week. Isn't that a great word? Live your life in such a way that you're the reason somebody at work, somebody in your 12-step meetings, your AA meeting, whatever, be the reason why somebody else comes to believe. Came to believe. Power greater than myself. Demonstrate Jesus' power in your life. Could restore me to sanity. Work the 12-step program. Live these principles. Watch your life change because of it, and thereby allow Him to restore you to all He's called you to be. That's it for tonight. Have a wonderful, wonderful tomorrow. Have some